Welcome to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank. It's a special episode. I got two UFO people on. UAP, what are we calling it now, people? Is it safe to say UFO still, or is it UAP?
I'm good with UFO, but it's like a trend, UAP actually may be better with Campbell if we're going to talk about, ball lightning and phenomena rather than, unidentified craft.
So it is a topic I think you guys might have differences and opinions on, mostly from Larry, your document studies, as we talked in your episode, and then Campbell. Through our many chats, we've talked about ball phenomena. I'm still in like the area where I'm bringing the government back in because I feel like, man, we don't know what the government's doing, but we do know what they're doing now. They've addressed it in a hearing, and it seems like the people who are supposed to be monitoring these things really don't have all the information on what they're supposed to be monitoring.
I let it's interesting in the fact that the government has kind of re-entered the fray, but what you're really saying there is Congress has forced the Department of Defense to at least acknowledge it and ask some questions about it. I do not think that the military would have volunteered and said, "Oh, we'd like to come testify to you guys about this. We're really interested in it. We just want to talk."
Go ahead, Campbell.
Just from, I do study the declassified documents. That's sort of my primary source of information on the subject. So I really appreciate Larry's work in that respect. And I think that Larry is honestly a researcher that I would aspire to be one day, because his focus is so heavily on the information and the verifiable information, in the sense of being able to look into the records and point exactly to where the information is originating. With respect to the new hearings, just from my relatively limited view, it looks a lot like the mid 1960s to me, and I would love to hear what Larry has to say on that.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And in fact, what I was struck in looking at some of the actual specific wording exchanges, I was thinking, the Robertson panel that was convened in 1952, the Air Force was really excited at that case. The interesting thing was in 1952, the Air Force was really seriously convinced there was something going on. There was a national security issue. The CIA was really convinced. They wanted to take it all the way to the National Security Council. And the National Security Council said, yeah, this is really kind of dicey, a dicey area, UFOs, flying saucers. We'll be willing to listen to you if you get a body of scientists to endorse it, and then it'll legitimize it and we can talk to you. And as it turns out, that body of scientists met for like 2-3 days, really wasn't all that interested. The whole initiative from the CIA and Air Force lost its energy, and it just faded away. And the net result at the end was there were questions going, well, maybe we shouldn't talk about this too much because it might concern the public. We'll get all sorts of false reports. It might actually be bad for national security. So they pushed away from it. Now it's kind of the reverse. It's not the military or the intelligence community trying to surface it to anybody. It's Congress trying to take it to them, going, we're hearing from constituents, we're hearing these reports in the media, tell us what's going on. And it's like the other direction. And yet during the hearing, you hear comments like, well, maybe, this will just be generating more reports and it might frighten people. And it's like, wait a minute, no matter which direction you start, it comes back to that. everybody just would really like to wash their hands of it.
Well, I mean, it's good that I guess for the UFO community that they finally are getting some at least talks about maybe more disclosure on some things, but also it's actually being mentioned on national television as well too, and Congress is talking about it. I think it gives more validity to the topic of UAPs and UFOs rather than just a thing you can roll your eyes at unless you're involved in the group and then you're kind of all about it. I saw a lot of UFO Twitter sparking up about it. I don't know if it's necessarily good or bad. I just look at it like, is this like just a thing that they're saying? Is it a pull for funding in a lot of aspects? I see a lot of that happen as well too. But if we do talk about an experience, or if we talk about something that I've been brought to light in when it comes to, is it? God, I'm gonna blank on his name again. Dan Halperin, his type of discussion about how we're projecting these things out of us. And then another talk I had with a friend of Campbell's, Massimo Teodori. That's how you say his last name, right?
Teodorani.
Teodorani. He talked about the idea of maybe that we're creating this type thing, or we might be seeing something that like an optical eye illusion in a sense. And I go, if this is this idea of projecting something out of you, you just got the general public to take the topic a little bit more serious. So hopefully, I mean, if you can probably pinpoint in the next month or so the number of UFO cases that go up, unless the aliens have a TV that can be able to see that we are talking about them, they might as well make themselves known, then that might be a plausible theory. But what I start looking at is if they're talking about the topic more seriously, and now New Jersey, for instance, just created a program that you can do at an institution where you can get your studies now in aerial phenomena, which is interesting. I definitely will go back to college for that. But it's a topic that is now starting to be holding a little bit more water than it was before, which I'm curious to see which end is it going to pop out. Is it going to pop out that there's more weather manipulation, or there's some other types of things that we're not going, skewing more probably towards Campbell's side? And then is it going to be something where we might actually see more of contact, or we might see something that could hold weight to a fact that there is intelligent life that has came to this planet? I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't life out there, but this is a topic that's a little bit more serious now that I guess it's on the big news and people can see it. I see Mick West on CNN. I had him on here debunking alien stuff, and now I see pictures of him. Like, what do you got to say now? Like, I'm not making fun of Mick West. I'm just looking at it like it gets a little bit harder when your government starts talking about it, and that's something everyone's kind of like, the government's the law. It's the word all in a sense, and it just has me over here curious. And I'm happy I got both you guys in a room to talk about this type of stuff.
Well, I do think one good point is it elevates the dialogue. I mean, when these things first started being reported widely in the media back in 47, you had like 2 months of serious reports and news coverage, and then it all became a joke. I mean, I can go back and look at the newspaper files, and it just, after people, seriously taking reports for a relatively short period of time, then it became entertainment. There were jokes, there were hoaxes, it was just like, let's snicker at it, let's laugh at it. And that's not happening now. I think that's a very good point. So at least it's maybe moved it out of the comedy and entertainment genre to something more serious, especially because this hearing was in front of an intelligence committee. This is not just a committee going, is this a phenomena? Is this science? Is it whatever? Is this something that could be a threat, a real security threat? So when you start talking about it in terms of a potential security threat, it does, okay, this isn't humorous. It really is. I think one of the things that I was surprised in the public hearing is that on a couple of occasions, the Congress people asked about the drone swarms. And the military acknowledged that in at least 2 instances, there were these very large-scale drone swarms that stalked and engaged naval units in operations and training exercises. I mean, that's serious stuff. This is not some, flying saucer by the side of the road, alien waves that pass her by. Yeah, it is serious stuff. But what struck me was, if I were had been on the committee, I would have really wanted to dial down into that. It's like, okay, you guys, you know they're there, you observed them, you photographed them, you even tried to use your anti-drone weapons to discourage them, and it didn't. Should I not be concerned? Who were these people? What were their intentions? Whoever they are, talk to me about their intentions, because you already admitted they were there and they were real, and they were following some kind of an intelligent agenda, engaging these Navy ships. But I didn't hear any real discussion of agendas or intentions. It's all still back to showing pictures and asking what these things are.
And that's something that has really confused me about the whole thing, got me interested in part originally, is that the behavior or the things that are being described don't make sense at face value, right? Like, for example, Dave Beatty released the recent information about the sightings over, I think it was the USS Roosevelt in something like 2015. Is that right? And he's describing, a luminous sphere, ellipsoid type thing that seems to just be tracking next to the aircraft carrier for an extended period of time. And it doesn't make sense from an oppositional standpoint, from if it's a foreign adversary or something of that nature. Like, why would you, if you had technology of this sort, why would you do that? And that's part that got me so confused. And I just want to clarify my position. I would define myself as a skeptic, but I do not think that it's absurd to think that there could be some kind of truly anomalous thing occurring in the sky. Actually, I'm convinced by the available public information that consists of declassified files and peer-reviewed papers in physics journals, that there are truly anomalous things happening in the sky. Just in 2014, ball lightning was proven to exist. And now I don't think all UFOs are ball lightning, but one argument I would make just in favor of the UFO community would be that, and it's just something that my fellow skeptics ignore, is that if ball lightning is real, then the claims about photographs not finding UFOs and therefore they don't exist makes no sense, because we know now ball lightning does exist, and the ball lightning they saw was over 3 feet wide with a 15-foot glow. So that's not something that anyone would think of as a normal thing to see. We don't have any photos that are verified except for the one that was published because it had spectral analysis done on it. So I think a lot of the arguments about, oh, this is absurd, it's completely, those are disingenuous arguments. They aren't taking the subject seriously. And I'm honestly taking the subject seriously. And that's part of why I really enjoy Larry's viewpoint on it. And I would love to get into the intention element as well, because in your last appearance, you mentioned, Larry, that you've have a database of 30 years of information from 45 to 75, if I remember correctly, and you're trying to analyze those things to infer what exactly is going on.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things where I think we confuse ourselves, is that we really don't approach this subject in any way that really relates to science. We don't approach it as a taxonomy. It's pretty clear that there are 4 or 5 different types of UFOs, UAPs. Natural phenomena on one side, as you say, that's now known. There's no doubt that there are natural phenomena that are reported as UFOs. Okay, there very well may be intelligent, or at least quasi-intelligent, reactive natural phenomena. On the other, you swing all the way over to the other side where there are unknown intelligences that, are natural, but they're intelligent. I mean, they're operating with an agenda, maybe short term, maybe, but we don't really do UAP. If there was a taxonomy and we could immediately say, which flavor are you talking about? Let's go down that road. Let's not smear them all together. I think we'd get further. In regards of intentions, of course, that means we're talking about something intelligent that does have a long-term agenda. And as you say, Campbell, we have a study undergoing that that essentially starts with that question. Can we find any long-term patterns of activity that would reflect intent? And if they do reflect intent, that means they reflect intelligence. So it's not just a natural phenomena that's showing up periodically and interacting with ships, planes, whatever, and that's our intention study. We're about 2 years in progress now. And we've assembled a database of, we started out with primarily with the Blue Book Unidentifieds, not the 20,000 plus Blue Book reports, but the 2,000 that they couldn't explain. And that was kind of the core of the database. And we have spent a long time building the database, and now we're into the pattern recognition phase. What patterns of activities are we seeing in various studies? So that's what we're looking for. We are looking for intent, and that's what struck me about the congressional hearing, because we're looking at it from somewhat of an intelligence perspective, the way an intelligence team would look at it. Intelligence folks never have as much information as they want. It's like, especially if you're trying to assess what's going on with somebody that's trying to keep information from you, it's like, okay, it's interesting that you note a lot of these sightings, like they're not covert. Like, these things are just hanging out there. They're quite visible. Like, whether it's those drone swarms or the things over the aircraft, like, this does not map at all to what we would consider, a covert surveillance, reconnaissance, whatever. That sounds much more like a natural phenomena, whether it's quasi-intelligent or not. But we're going the other side. We're looking at something that could not be natural because it's exhibiting an agenda.
Well, just to put a pin in the congressional hearing thing, or put a nail in that coffin, I would say I don't see any of those people taking it seriously. Not the intelligence community or the people that were being questioned, but the actual people who were asking the questions. It kind of seems like they were trying to be like, you don't have this. And I don't know, because how they edit TV. I mean, I know that was a live hearing and stuff like that, but the bits and clips that you'll be able to see are like key moments of like, you don't know about this thing that shut down 10 of our whatever. I mean, these certain instances are kind of like, they're going to be moments that are going to be trending, and they're going to be showing up on Twitter and all these social media apps. They're going to have people just be deterred from the topic or any of that, which leads still more of the research to be on independent researchers like Campbell, like you, Larry, that are doing your own work in your own communities to be able to provide the information and, document stuff as well too. And it's going to be the same thing before this even happened. It's going to be back to where it was. My only interest here is that when people bring up the argument that how do they know? They knew where our flight patterns were. That's where I start thinking about government tech again. Now, I know there's some tech that obviously we don't have that has been spotted and has been seen. But when we are doing things like this, and I'm trying to get that funding aspect kind of taken out of it. But even with Bill Nelson coming out talking about trying to find our origins and all this, these are things that I start to raise questions with, because I don't take any of these people that are taking this topic seriously. I take you guys seriously, but these people that are going to set up people in their own intelligence committee to look like kind of idiots with asking them questions that they don't know they're not people that care about the problem. Half the time I'm looking at that guy asking the questions and I just go, that person doesn't care what the answer is. He's just like, why are we spending time on this? Let me make it really some hard hitting questions to the point where they can't answer. Either it's going to be a push or funding for the intelligence community, or it's going to be, let's drop this topic and move on to something else. And I don't really see them handling the ball correctly. Honestly, I think if you ask me where we should obligate our time to is having more independent researchers and more investigative communities that are working in science coalitions like yours, Larry, and even Campbell, if you were up there as well too, I'd say we'd fund your little research community to go after all of them as well too, just because you guys do a very good breakthrough and analysis of things. Now, when it comes to some topics of alien phenomena, if we swing the ball into something that we can't explain, if we swing it to something that is might be intelligent life. What is a clear-cut example of a question that should have been asked at that hearing that was not brought up? Because I could name a couple, like the Nimitz, for instance. I mean, that's something that has just been this unexplained thing, whether you want to say this or that. Even the Bob Lazar thing, whether the people want to hold the story as a truth or fake. These are giant, very, very huge and giant, like, I guess, keyholes where people always point back to. There's this. Area 51, that should have been a question that should have been addressed at that hearing. There was no talk about that. You're having key examples of where government has covered something up, and then now it's been exposed by the community. So you might as well address it and talk about it. Like, what are going on in these types of events? And we don't have any of that. So then you have a lot of people that are upset with how this thing has went. Honestly, to me, it's just noise. It's not something that I really wanted to pay attention to. I think I watched like 40 minutes of it or something, and I was done. Because honestly, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard is way more fascinating. But it's a good thing that they're talking about it. But if anybody can really look at it with your own personal favorite of a hooray, we finally got it done, you look at it as it's not really doing anything. It's not really doing anything but honestly hurting the topic. Yeah, it's cool that they're talking about it. Maybe they're looking into it behind closed doors, but where's the common examples? Roswell, all these things that constantly get brought up, whether it's been debunked or bunked, whatever you want to say. They did not address any of these. They did not talk about this. They talked about modern issues. They showed a really crappy video of a ball that went. I didn't even see it. I didn't see it. I was like, what is, I had to watch it like 5 or 10 times to be able to actually get a good view of it, where you start going, is this like, did they not, is this guy off the street? Did he just learn about the topic 5 minutes ago and hop in? Like, but these are questions you have to ask, because it's going to stay the course of direction, or there are things that you should be talking about to be, I guess, come at it without your bias put in. You have to look at it as just a person that wants information on something, and the information, they're not being transparent, and the questions, they're not giving it the time of day that it properly needs if you're going to take it seriously. I think a lot of people in the UFO community definitely deserve that. I will say that about the community, is that there's a lot of people that fought for that.
Yeah, I think that you're touching on something very relevant there. I think that the government generally would prefer not to talk about this. Like they mentioned a couple times at the hearing, all of these things, the sensors that they're using to detect these things, they're all very sensitive. They don't want their adversaries, their Earth-based adversaries, to know how good they can detect things and how far away and what everything is. And then people, this is actually something, Larry, I'm sure very familiar with, in the original documents in the 50s, in the CIA memos from 52 after the Washington, DC flyover incident. The CIA was talking about how they have to be cautious of the fact that the UFO community could be exploited by foreign services in order to seek out classified information. So there are all these competing interests involved, but I think genuinely the United States government would rather, and I think that the memos sort of verify this, the declassified memos, they don't want to be encouraging people to be thinking about the stuff like Roswell and stuff. Not because I don't like Larry made a really good breakdown on the last appearance. I don't think that there's really much to Roswell. I don't think that Lazar is a great example. One thing that I thought was pretty shocking was that they did introduce the Wilson Memo to the record, and that's something that has been almost exclusively focused on by the UFO Twitter and Reddit communities. And that is sort of in line with Roswell in my mind, because there are some elements of it that are true, but then it's just grown and grown with all of this extra information that is unverifiable. And to me, I think that this is a serious subject, and I think that there are truly anomalous things. And I think that, you know, at the most skeptical side, the point that the CIA made in the 50s is still valid, that if there's this stigma attached to identify to reporting when you see a UFO, then foreign adversaries can slip through. And I think that there is more to it than that. But that's sort of the core of it that I think that has been lost with all of these sort of surrounding stories or myth or lore for that they, like the Wilson Memo.
Yeah, and in terms of questions that they didn't, I guess two things were kind of shocking to me. On the congressional side, there's some very simple questions that they didn't ask, not about UFOs or UAPs, but literally, what are you guys doing? We've given you a mandate. We've given you a mandate to evaluate it as a threat and report back to us. Now, and I will say this, SCU, we submitted some questions to the committee that probably would have been a bit painful if they'd been asked, like, okay, how many people do you have on staff that are looking into this? What kind of analysis are you actually doing? What specialists are, do you have photo interpretation specialists? Are you doing any pattern studies? Are you doing any pattern recognition? Yeah, they didn't ask any of those questions about the people that are assigned to carry out the inquest. They really didn't. The best they got back was, well, we've had 400 new reports. Well, who's we? Who got them? How did you evaluate them? What are your capabilities? So they managed to not stress them out any at all about how they're doing it. But on the other side, the most shocking thing that I probably heard from these senior military intelligence people, okay, was when one of the Congress people asked about any history of UAP activities around atomic defense facilities. And the answer was, oh, I really don't know. Now, if I had been called in front of the committee, considering the ranks of these individuals and the fact that they have staffs, it's like, okay, Captain so-and-so or Major so-and-so, you got 2 days, give me a brief on anything related to national security that these people might ask about. And the guy sits down and does a Google search. You're going to find Loring Air Force Base, and you're going to find Malmstrom, and you're going to find Fated Giant. You're going to find these atomic ICBM bases. How could they not? So, Campbell, you said something about taking it seriously. That struck me as they really aren't taking it seriously at all, because that's their job. In terms of, are these things a threat or not? They don't even seem to have asked the very basic background questions. So, I mean, the questions that are missing aren't just questions about UFOs. They're questions about, how are you handling this whole thing? What do you know? What are you trying to find out? And I didn't get a sense. I think you're right, Campbell, but let's boil it down. What senior military officer wants to be called in front of a committee anticipating they're going to get a question like, are you telling me that you can't track these things? Are you telling me that you can't intercept these things? I mean, those are really embarrassing questions. Those didn't get asked either. So no, the military doesn't want to disclose their capabilities, but they also really don't want to get into the area of what they can and cannot do in response to them either.
Well, we have two, I guess, pathways in front of us. One is the fact of the ethics. Is it just because they're trying to cover their ass when it comes to the amount of information that they do have that they don't feel like other people should know about? And we got to understand is when you're watching something that's like this, other people in other countries are watching the same exact thing and seeing what is being told. So it's probably not best to give away the secret sauce or whatever you want to say to other countries out there who might be compiling their own information. But during the UAP package release, from what I could tell, is we like 16 pages? Is that what we got? And 6 of it was index pages and listings of other topics. And each page was referencing something else. It was like, what? But other places, especially talking to a friend of mine, Dr. Serene Nemi, who even mentioned, like, they're not telling you anything over there. Like, they gave us 1,000-something pages over here. And you're just like, so, okay. So is our government keeping a lot of secrets? Is that because we might have more evidence on things, or we're trying not to jump to conclusions, or another thing's going to be rooted out? And just like how we were all talking a minute ago about the fact, are they taking this seriously? It's going to show, is this going to be something where people are in a position where they're not actually investigating alien stuff or UFO stuff. Instead, they're just saying that they are, and they're collecting a paycheck. And nobody wants to stop that paycheck from rolling in. That's a good thing to think about because it's happened before. It's not out of the realm of possibility to collect a paycheck. It's like why people do welfare shit all the time. But these are big issues. But when I talk about a question, for instance, either it's to you, Larry, or to you, Campbell, one thing that you could easily bring up, a more modern example of something that should be talked about, or maybe something that can be looked into. You guys might have different answers, but Larry, if I started with you, what's one thing you could just be like, this is the most recent, this is something you guys should be focused in on, this should be something that should be answered, whether it's scientifically or whether it's, I don't know, but this is what we have so far?
Mine would be, and you got to remember, I tend to focus when I get into these things on what the question of that committee should be. And the question that I would really like to have seen asked was, we've told us about these drone swarms near the Navy ships. Have you encountered any other examples of that? And by the way, since the Air Force doesn't seem to be here, and NORAD doesn't seem to be here, and Homeland Security doesn't seem to be here, my most contemporary question are you seeing any evidence of UAP activity over the continental United States, over strategic targets, over nuclear facilities, over power plants, over what, you've just told us about these things. What's going on that you haven't discussed? And that would have forced them, and you all are aware of it, I'm sure, to get back to the drone swarms over the nuclear plants in California, drone swarms over the Colorado, Montana, in the areas peripheral to our ICBM sites that happened. And probably the most classic case that bothers me is about 4 years ago, there was an unidentified object, not unconventional. Okay, this thing was seen by multiple aircraft. It's flying right in the middle of the major West Coast traffic lanes going up the coast. It's going at commercial jet speed, but it is first reported outside Los Angeles to FAA control. Multiple commercial airliners are seeing it. The thing progressed all the way up to the West Coast, all the way up to Washington State, okay? And it was reported to NORAD. They scramble fighters, and they never were able to intercept it. This is not even an unconventional aircraft. So this is an area of embarrassing questions just related to UFOs, if you will, or UAPs, not anything really terribly unconventional that I would have liked to heard deal with, because it deals with, defense questions. Can you guys, what happens when you get one of these things reported? Can you even intercept it? We know from this report and from the air traffic control that you scrambled F-15s up and down the coast, and they couldn't find it. Now, maybe they don't ask this in the public session that they had. I hope they asked something like that in the after session that was classified. But to me, they're not asking the hard defense questions. I'd love to talk UFOs and UAPs, but they're not even asking the hard defense, security, intelligence questions.
Well, what's a good example, Campbell, through your research or through, just looking through and seeing recent occurrences or anything that you might have come across on through your findings that you would point to as an example of something that we should look into? Because already over here, I'm thinking this would be a great time to start talking to experiencers or questioning these people who have had experiencer stories and sensing out more authenticity or validity in any of these stories, as well as doing a thorough check, maybe creating a database or creating a network. We have the disinformation committee out there, or league, or whatever the board is called. You can invent something that looks at these UFO videos besides having Mick West and his bedroom talking about these occurrences. You could just have a thing set up to be like, this is a fake video, this is a fake video. They have the technology way more advanced than a common Googler can do, so they can at least sort out what's real and what's fake, and then question people. I mean, I wouldn't put it above them just to ask some YouTuber who's talking about UFOs to take them from obscurity and push them into infamy by questioning their experiences and their knowledge or anything that they have. What do you think?
Yeah, well, okay, if I was going to ask them something, the intention of the government, I think, plays a part in forming the question, because I think there are real national security issues here, and I have no interest in really harming national security just through a curiosity about UFOs. But there are some things that I have identified that I would very specifically point to and suggest that these are things that should be addressed. So Unidentified Celebrity Review, the YouTube show and podcast last September, had their event, The Big Phone Home 2, which was dozens of UAP, UFO researchers and things like that coming onto the show, doing a marathon to encourage congressional hearings. It's unclear if they had any impact on the actual outcome, but I was a panelist on one of the things. And the host, Luis Jimenez, made a very specific thing. He said, if there was one thing that you could put on a senator's desk, what would it be? Because, it's like there's so many things going on all the time. You need to point at one thing. So the one thing that I have identified as what I would put on the senator's desk is the executive summary of the unidentified aerial phenomena in the United Kingdom Air Defense Region report. It's a 23-page executive summary, and it's the breakdown of the classified study conducted by the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense about UFOs. It was secret at the time, and they in that report there's a introductory paragraph. It says that UAP exist is indisputable. And then then it's like, Mick West always says, like, yeah, of course, I saw a UAP on the way to work. It was got a little closer and it was a seagull. Ha ha ha. Now this is the thing, is that my fellow skeptics will not talk to me about this report because it damages the story that they promote, which it's typically in accord with this scientific method and stuff, but there are notable exceptions. So this report is one of them. And so then the next sentence after saying UAP exists is indisputable.
Wait, do you have the report? Can you pull it up? I gave you share screen privileges. You can both share at any time.
I'm on my laptop, and the RAM is so poor on my laptop that it will black out my screen, so I can't share. But if you on my website, there's one of the it's basically a book, and it's chapters, and the chapter UK National Archives, it has it right there. But the next sentence after indisputable says, credited with the ability to hover, land, take off at exceptional velocities, and vanish. They can outmaneuver any known aircraft or missile, manned or unmanned. So they define it exactly in terms of the most extraordinary features that high credibility UFO eyewitnesses have reported for decades. And yet I cannot get a skeptic to look at the report and talk to me about it, even though it's on the UK National Archives website. So I would ask ask the witnesses at the committee, I would ask them if they were familiar with that, and to explain essentially what the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom is talking about, since the United States' intelligence community has not been exposed to have made such a definitive statement that's publicly available and citable.
Campbell brought up something that I would like to add this. If you could separate the dialogue and have a dialogue about unidentified national security concerns from a dialogue about unconventional observations, I think it would be very helpful, because nobody does that. It's like, oh, I've just got this photo and it's just sitting there, and I don't know what it is. Well, I don't, it's not that I don't care, but what I want to do is I want to see the data from the Nimitz incident, or some of these incidents where these things are demonstrating 500G acceleration. There's no question about it. Material structure can't hold together. Forget how they're doing it. It just, So I would like to have a dialogue, sort of like go one direction with the unidentified, but really have a separate discussion on unconventional and ask whether or not they are having the unconventional incidents studied by DARPA or studied by someone with some real scientific skills, because I don't think they separate them. You know, they take them one by one. They don't separate them. That's what SCU would like. It's sort of like, we don't even care about your sensors, you know, but we would like to see just some level of technical detail on the truly unconventional cases so we can look at that aspect of it. But I don't know, because no one asked that question. You guys tell me. I don't recall any dialogue in the hearing really that related much to the unconventional objects that would truly have behavior that is out of limits. You know, no, it's not the Chinese, it's not the Russians.
Well, so I'm on Campbell's website right now, and I was scrolling through. He mentioned something up here. I think I might have just passed it. What is it? Is it
Oh yeah, these are the CIA memos. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You're
but
going
you
before
said
that.
the FBI's protection of vital installments memo. Nighttime sightings have taken the form of lights usually described as brilliant green. Other reports have given the colors red, white, blue, white, and yellowish green. Army intelligence has recently said that the matter of unidentified aircraft or unidentified aerial phenomena, otherwise known as flying discs, flying saucers, and balls of fire, is considered top secret by intelligence officers of both the Army and the United States Air Force. G2 and OSI are officially engaged in investigating the matter. Now, these are from 1949, obviously, but if we scroll down here to what I just saw a minute ago, where is it?
That 1949 report, I think, was primarily stimulated by sightings at Oak Ridge. The FBI was far more involved with the Oak Ridge sightings than the Air Force was. The Air Force trying to ignore it.
So the CIA recognizes the need to distinguish between the natural phenomenon and the potential Soviet attack, given their problematic visual and electronic effects. The problem, which is to determine definitely the nature of various phenomena which are causing these sightings, or discover means by which these causes have their visual and electronic effects, may be immediately identified. Our consultant panel stated that these solutions would probably be found on the margins or just beyond the frontiers of our present phenomena, with the added possibility that our present dispersal of nuclear waste products might also be a factor. They recommended that a study group to be formed to determine the fields of fundamental science which must be investigated in order to reach an understanding of the phenomena involved. The CIA discusses the potential use of UAP in psychological warfare. So my whole point in all that is you're seeing a lot of back and forth between there's at least they recognize back then about different types of natural phenomena or different types of occurrences that could be. And Larry, like we talked in your episode about Cold War tactics as well too. A lot of that Cold War, everything was kind of blamed on Russians, was probably skewed a lot of information that could have been possible UAP stuff and maybe into the Russia area, mostly because you don't know what your enemy is, and you always like to think that your enemy is a little bit farther than what you know. And that's like how I think about our government. Our government is definitely farther than what they tell us that they are. But it leads into this area where if they're doing maybe classified sessions or they're doing classified hearings where they're asking real hard hitting questions and are leaving the public open to this idea of maybe losing interest in the topic of UFOs because our government, now that they're taking it seriously, aren't really taking it seriously, it brings into question the validity of what their research is. Are they looking at all aspects of this thing like they did before? Are we looking at this as another type of person's technology? Are we looking at this as more of a natural phenomenon when it comes to these certain things? They have a whole list, like we mentioned earlier, a panel of scientists out there who have been voicing their opinion publicly by themselves. And we haven't seen any of these people even talked about or mentioned in that hearing, or even mentioned at all on a NASA website or something like that, where you start wondering if they're really putting the resources into this type of thing, where I just asked the questions of some simple cases out there that people that they could easily look at and debunk. Now, when we say easily looked at in UFO cases, for instance, it's very hard to tell what that is. As far as we know, they haven't really been able to do it as such. You have Nick West trying his best, but we're in this area where you have very, very strong points that people bring up. And I would say you need to talk to experiencers. If you have a whole list of people out there with famous experiencer stories, it's the same thing they did with near-death experiences, which they have not done with experiencer stories. And that is talk to these people and given them a thorough breakdown and analysis and a psychological review to see if they're telling the truth or not. Now, I'm not saying experiencers are liars, but I'm saying you can check if someone actually believes what they're saying or they're saying to get attention. And what I'm picking up notes of a lot of people I've heard experiencer stuff from and just seen experiencer stuff out there and people hyping up, like Skinwalker Ranch, I think is a hype up thing. I don't really see a whole lot get done, but the show sells pretty well. That's a good spot to investigate. I mean, go investigate there. Go investigate all these top trending places that people talk about. You need to address these problems as well too. If I see a Netflix doc for Area 51 and they're walking us through the whole building, I'm giving up on the whole topic in general.
What I saw in the committee, I don't think that they're doing any more than Project Sign did back in the late 1940s. They're taking report, and you heard them essentially say that, oh, we've got more reports now than we were getting before. We've set up a new system so that we're encouraging reports. Reports are coming in and we're looking at them. End of story. We're not researching the phenomena. We're not, we're looking at it report by report. And we just want to assure you that we're doing a good job of soliciting reports and looking at the reports and trying to identify them. End of story. Yeah. Brian, you brought up there. I've certainly seen on Facebook people that were on the Nimitz talking about experiences beyond just, what the pilots saw. I don't see any sign that these people are sending a team out and interviewing the sailors that were with the Nimitz group, interviewing any of those people. Did you sense something different? Did you, they're not retroactively going back and looking at even those most recent cases. They're just taking reports in and seeing if they can identify them.
Well,
that's it.
What tools are they using to measure? Are they using the same tools they used in 1952? Are they using newer methods of studying gravitational whatever, studying frequencies, doing something? You can do something to at least show or at least give us more of a rundown of what equipment and tactics that you're using as well too. Those aren't military things. Those aren't things to be able to detect secret stuff that's military intelligence. This is just this UAP intelligence. How are you studying these things? Are you talking to scientists? Can you just let us know a little bit of that? But that wasn't brought up. We had a couple of, I think they try to distract a lot of people with the types of like drone swarms and all these types of things. And we can say that maybe they're not taking it seriously, but at the same time, I mean, do you think that information should be out there if they were taking it seriously? I mean, imagine if we did have, and honestly, I think it's good that it showed that they weren't taking it seriously, only on an aspect of this. It makes our intelligence committee not look that bad, because if they were asking some hard-hitting questions and they didn't have answers, I would be a lot more scared than us maybe scoffing or laughing at the questions that went in that hearing. So I'm glad I didn't know there was a classified section of it, but I mean, thoughts on that? Come on. I don't want to break down the whole hearing the whole time. I definitely think you guys probably got more questions and stuff in your head. I'm just making sure that we're not all falling for some long played out series like Game of Thrones. It seems like it lasts 10 years and nobody ever stops talking about it, even though the show's been done for 20. Like it's just,
okay. Well, oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say you asked for a question that didn't get asked. Okay. And one question that didn't get asked is, well, tell us of those 400, 600, what, how many have you studied to the extent that it is truly unconventional performance that we're seeing? Nobody really asked that question. Or what tools how do you know that? They didn't, they're still stuck on this identification thing.
They're using dowsing rods to find the
But they really didn't. Nobody said, oh, we're using this technique. We're using, we've got all this signals data and all this sensory data from the Nimitz incident. And, we have had our experts look at it, and those people that studied it within SCU are just totally off base. No, it really wasn't, 500G acceleration, because our physicists studied it and we proved that it wasn't. You didn't hear that. So Campbell, I'm sorry. No, they're not talking about unconventional performance in these objects.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm picking up as well. And I'm getting, like I mentioned before, it seems a lot like Blue Book. And Robbie, you identified like, oh, I don't want this to be just like a 10-year thing that goes nowhere. Speculatively, I would say that I think that is maybe the intention, and depending on the reasons for that, maybe it's a good reason or a bad reason, depending on what the underlying seriousness is. But the thing that really caught me and drove me into this subject was basically the inconsistencies, the things that don't make sense if you were to believe the government. As a average middle class citizen here, I'm 100% historically an atheist from my youngest memories. I'm a philosophical substance monist. I don't think that there's a life beyond death. None of that. I have no interest in the paranormal, no interest in the supernatural. I've never looked into high strangeness in any way.
Damn, you really don't like my show.
Well,
and
no,
he's
I
not
do.
watching Skinwalker. I
Yeah,
guarantee
no,
that. Yeah.
no, but I do think that there is something actually occurring. I think that there is reason to believe, it's more likely than not, that there is a real phenomenon at the heart of the UFO mystery. And when you look at the data and there are these indications in these old files, so let's say this is a conversation I've had with people, both believers and skeptics. Let's say that the UK Ministry of Defense and the CIA memos and stuff like that, let's say that those are genuine, sincere documents. Let's also say that the government, both those intelligence agencies, believe that they are correct in their analyses. From those documents, my interpretation is that the CIA, US Air Force, and the UK Ministry of Defense all believe that UFOs are real. They do exhibit all of the features in the most extraordinary, incredible eyewitness reports. And then they say, we believe these are natural atmospheric plasma phenomena akin to ball lightning. However, ball lightning has been observed in an abstract form by Dr. Massimo Teodoranti, astrophysicist in Hesdal, Norway, in his 3 field studies. We don't know if that is ball lightning, and it could be a mix. Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis wrote a paper together in the 90s where they said, we think that perhaps UFOs are doing spoofing, and if they are intelligently controlled, like some meteors appear to then move with intelligence after they've progressed through the atmosphere. So perhaps this plasma field around them is a spoofing technique. I don't know if that's true or not, obviously. My intuition veers towards natural. Just, I mentioned that my history is all entirely based on that. So I recognize that I could have a bias towards that. I think also, though, so in the UK Ministry of Defense report, when they say, well, we believe these are natural plasma phenomena, they say they don't understand how they form, they don't understand any of the mechanisms, and they also say we believe that some may be meteorites that do not fully disintegrate in the atmosphere and then become a gas, an ionized mass that moves in these ways according to electromagnetic forces. But they say they believe that, they aren't sure. If we have intelligence reports from the UK Ministry of Defense saying UFOs are real, they have all of the features of these historical eyewitness reports, and we're seeing them come in, and we think they're meteorites, and then they start moving around as though under intelligent control, but we think that it's electromagnetic. That is a situation that I can't wrap my head around. How could these intelligence services operate internally on that level of uncertainty about something that could be the biggest story in history? And that's the thing that really just shocks me. And I think that that's stuff that they're trying to lump everything together, the sort of drones with these most extraordinary things. And I don't know exactly why, but I think that what Larry said last time you guys spoke is maybe true, is that they really actually don't have the hard answers, and they're a little bit kind of afraid to admit that.
Well, here's a good insight into what's been going on. If I asked you the question, is this the first time that they ever really communicated to each other, the intelligence community at this aspect or this angle of the intelligence community to the actual Congress people who are involved in politics? It seems like these two have been separate for a very long time. It was definitely a very awkward hearing. But the best example or the best phrase I could really give you comes from my buddy George Howard, who works with the Cosmic Tust about the younger giant impact hypothesis, where he says, for so long, the astronomers stared up at the sky and the geologists focused on the ground and they never talked. This is what happens when you have two establishments that should be working together to be more beneficial that haven't really come in contact or have any basis of questions. That's why it begins so awkward. It's this aspect of when you watch that hearing, and I'm just going to examine that hearing real quick, is that there is a disconnect between a person who's in their late 30s that's talking to people who probably have been involved in this for 20 something years or however long. And there hasn't really been they should have had a pre-conversation. They should have had an open discussion. Now, maybe they got more comfortable after closed doors, sure, but it didn't come off well. And it makes you question our maybe a hindrance in our research or a hindrance of where we're at now to be able to study intelligent life is the fact that there hasn't been this open conversational thing. Now, one thing that I've done with my show is talk to a lot of people, a lot of various aspects of space. Now, recently, or not even recently, probably 100 something episodes ago, I talked to Avi Loeb, who was the guy who discovered a Moa that was entering our atmosphere and deemed it as something from a lost civilization. Now, if that is anomaly, and that is something that was pushed out from maybe outside of our galaxy that came in its way here. And they want to say it's extraterrestrial because we've never seen something like that before. If we go by that plausible thing, hopefully that gets enough people with all their ducks in a row to be able to pay attention to what this thing is and hopefully find an answer to make sure that maybe there is intelligent life out there. But one thing I can't explain or I can't understand is if you have various accounts of multiple different UAPs, from a black triangle in the sky to all these types of things, or saucer disc, whatever you want to say, is it one alien type or is it another? Is it a bunch? These are questions that you need to ask. Are they upgrading their tech? Are they keeping it the same? Are they we're just this visiting planet? Is it like going to the zoo and you get to see a bunch of people fight over Jersey Shore or something like that? I have no clue. But these are important things that you've only been able to get one certain type. And that one certain type has been the dish shape or maybe a more circular form. But when you see these black triangles, they don't look real. They look like it's a falsified thing. And I would think that would be your first crucial step as just maybe a public service as an intelligence community to sort out if that's valid or not. Is that something that people are experiencing? Now, I've heard 3 experiencer stories, 2 that were completely separate over a year and a half apart on the show. And they explain the exact same thing, the exact basically same way. And these people don't know each other, which made me start to take it more seriously, only because they talked about 2-dimensional. They started talking about how they seemed like it was flat, but you could watch these lights in the sky as you'd walk. It seemed like you could see around it in a sense. Like there was like this bend, like something was there in the sky that was like this transparent thing. Now, I've heard other encounters of the same exact proportion before. So I start going into, I mean, is that real? Is that an optical eye illusion? I would think that it could be that. I mean, I talked to Massimo when he was on the show and staring up at the sky, smoking a cigarette. I see this little white ball go back and forth and zoop around. And I'm like, what is that? Is that my eyes playing tricks on me? That could be a likely scenario that we're dealing with, but you have a lot of people that are talking about this, and eventually with enough time that gets passed, much like things tend to die down like a fire, you have answers that become unexplained. And you have instances where me and Larry have a little secret interest is JFK. You have this thing that is going on for so freaking long, we don't have the answer to. And the amount of secrecy, the amount of lying, the amount of covering up, the amount of information, the amount of different perspectives out there, it becomes an answer that you're never going to have. And I think this is a crucial issue. Back to Oumuamua. if it's an anomaly, if it's from another galaxy, if it's an extraterrestrial thing, it would be nice to have more comfortability in addressing what that situation is. Now, I know we can't study it because it's gone now or it's wherever it went, but this should definitely be something where why aren't we getting interactions or phone calls about from the ISS or from other space stations or other things that are able to detect this type of stuff? They just magically are here and then they go away, they fly off somewhere. Okay, I get if they stay on in our atmosphere, we can't see them. But besides, we can monitor meteors that come in. But where's the UAP stuff? You're telling me you can't catch one of those things entering our atmosphere? Like that's a big question where I go, is that maybe some tech or something we could start funneling into? At least like, come on, doors have a freaking thing when you walk in. It makes a bing bong when you walk in. Do that for our galaxy would be nice. You know, something larger than the size of a space saucer that enters our freaking atmosphere would be a great start.
Well, I can't give you one answer. Back a little bit further at that.
I ranted hard. I'm sorry.
No, as far as I know so little, but this I can say. We decided we'd ask the question that you brought up, and in terms of what do they look like? Are there different types? You know, that basic question. And a friend of mine, Robert Powell, and I, we started out with some. I think we looked at 10,000 reports. And what our parameter was is we have to find a report where the object is close enough to the individual so the individual can see it in 3 dimensions. Okay. And so we did some geometry, and he did. And so we went through this whole body of reports, and we ended up with, I think, maybe 500 reports. And this is over, you know, the entire span of decades of where the observer was close enough so he could describe very clearly the physical details. So we're not talking about an orb. We're talking about structural detail that they reported. And in 3 dimensions, they can see the depth, they can estimate size. And so the question was, okay, let's profile those. How many, and we're calling this a SCU's characteristic study. Okay. We looked at a lot of things, data related to that small body of sightings, EMF effects, station keeping, maneuvering, hovering, all sort of stuff. But one of the things that fell out of the study very specifically is I think we identified 8 shapes, and those shapes did vary over time. It's like there are favorites. They changed the model year, whatever. Okay. No, there weren't that many black triangles to begin with. Then the black triangles show up. But one of the constants is it doesn't matter what the shape is. It doesn't matter how non-aerodynamic the shape is. I mean, I can go to the Hudson River Valley in New York State and show you hundreds of close-up observations of something that looks like a flying bridge. I mean, this thing is metallic looking. It's got struts. It's got, you know, if like you lifted up a bridge and put it up in the air and it's kind of cruising along and it's got lights all over it. I mean, the least covert thing that you can, and it's only a few hundred feet up in the air, right? Okay, so it's almost like it wants to be seen. This thing can perform exactly like our nice little tiny silver disc flying saucers. It can accelerate at the same rate. It can decelerate at the same rate. It can literally disappear because it's leaving faster than the eye can perceive. Okay, it's moving that kind of acceleration. You know, whatever they look like, they have the same performance characteristics that have been observed, which actually says a lot about how they're propelled, about how they're built. You know, clearly aerodynamics is not part of the equation. You know, it's not happening. Yeah, the flying saucers look like they were aerodynamics. That's more of a stretch with the black triangles. Some of these things that are seen close up, you know, like were put together with, you know, a building block set. You know, this is Legos, you know, but they still have the same, Campbell, that's what we're unconventional performance. So if you just pull that equation together, it says a lot about what they are. They're not natural phenomena. This, you know, they're physical concrete object, unless they're project. I mean, but these, it has to be a 3D projection. Okay. There's no doubt about it. So we're kind of, we asked ourselves that question, but this is a question I don't think anybody that's in this UFO project or UAP project with the government right now is even asking that question. Like, did they take the 400 reports that they just got and say, oh, look, these are the unconventional ones and they're all the same? Oh, maybe that'll tell us something. But so for your question, there's some basic questions that we can ask and answer with the data that we've got without even having any new data. But to be long-winded, I'll make one other comment because you brought up several things. I think there is a fundamental disconnect. When this is all finished, you're going to send up with the same statement from this committee, or from the military side of the committee, that we got from Blue Book in 1969, 1970. And the answer is going to be, we studied hundreds of these, and in no instance did we find any evidence of hostile action. No, these things are not a threat from their perspective, and therefore they're not our job. Because the basic disconnect between the committee and the military is, it's not like the intelligence community goes off and does what it wants to do. It is tasked by the Director of National Intelligence, the National Security Council. They get a very specific list. This is the thing you guys work on. Here's 20 different things, ranging from terror threats to China to whatever. That's what they work on. If that's not on their list, they don't assign teams to it. It's not a long-term studied activity. And I don't see any evidence. That was one of the questions we passed the committee was, has this subject, outside this congressional committee asking about it, has it been tasked within the national intelligence structure? I see no evidence that it has. And until it is, then there's a disconnect, because the people whose day job is protecting the country are worried about real threats. Unless you task it as a real threat, they will only put as much time and energy and money into it as Congress kind of forces them to. It becomes a political thing. So I probably belabored that point. I'll give it back to you guys.
I think the Black Triangle subject is a very interesting one, and it's very effective for sort of laying out all of these issues in the subject. I've spoken to UFO believer, in quotes, community members and fellow skeptics about it. A skeptic who's very active on UFO Twitter, I respect his opinion a lot, Steve Long. He has talked about on podcasts about how he personally saw a black triangle when he was young, and that sparked his interest in the subject. And for a variety of reasons, he now thinks that UFOs are basically, like, not that they don't exist, but they're some kind of government technology black project thing. And there's interesting stuff involved in that, like NIDS, Robert Bigelow's association there, NIDS, National Institute for Discovery Science, I believe it was. They, in the early 2000s, released a report that said that black triangles are real and they seem to be a government tech. And then they released a follow-up report and withdrew that analysis based on a number of factors. Basically, just, if I remember correctly, it's that the performance characteristics seemed inconsistent. But if we stick to the black triangle, so Dr. Massimo Teodoranti in Hezbollah describes seeing a black triangle. He doesn't know what it is. He says very specifically, like, I have no idea what I saw. And he says, like, he talks about how he could see the structure exactly like how Larry's describing. And then you have, before that, Erling Strand, who is the assistant professor at Østfold University College up in Norway. He did the original Hesdalen field study in 1984-85. And he has described seeing in daylight luminous objects moving together as though they are connected centrally to a central structure. And he's very clear as well that he has no idea what that is. Now, and then there's the other side of it, like the UK Ministry of Defense. That report, the secret report they compiled in order, and it was a very secret report. They had no intention of having that become public. It specifically talks about black triangles. And in that report, it says that they're real. It says that black triangles do exist in Earth's atmosphere. Now, what the report says is, it says it seems as though charged plasma balls can become electromagnetically coupled together, and then the space between them forms a shape, often a triangle, that produces a light scattering effect through the electromagnetic. Okay, and this is the crazy part where, like I was talking about before, it really sparks my curiosity, because they're saying, oh, we think this is natural, and then they say a field with as yet undetermined properties appears to scatter the light between the coupled buoyant charged masses. So they're saying the triangles are real. They're briefing top leadership in the UK that the triangles are real. And then it's like, well, what is it? And they're like, well, maybe it's a field of some kind that we don't even know about scientifically that's producing this effect. And then you look and you see thousands or hundreds at least of eyewitness reports describing the similar things. And I don't know, is it a level of incompetency that we just can't even conceive of? Or like, what is that? What's going on, right? It doesn't make any sense.
I give leniency, just the amount of science or tools we have for measurement. I don't give leniency to the people in the intelligence community for not mentioning the tools that they're using. They could easily mention the things, because we do have updated tech that can do a lot more than what it could do in 1952. When it comes to science, though, and we come to like space, for instance, I mean, dark matter research is well of recent. Even if you look up the idea of multiverses, there's research and scientists out there that do believe in multiverses, and there's people that don't. I think a lot of this type of stuff really boils down to a concept of the times that we're in and the information that we have. And we haven't really had transparency on anything. It's not just the UFO topic. It boils down to other things as well, too. I think we are limited by our technology. If I hop in the boat saying that this is aliens, maybe there was one occurrence. Maybe there was just one. Maybe it went bad. Maybe we grabbed something, an alien like people talk about, or something of that sort. And next thing you know, we're modifying tech, or we're using its tech and trying to figure it out. Either you could replicate it to make more of these occurrences, or you just pissed off the family members of the damn thing you caught. So I get to this aspect. Maybe that's why you're seeing more interactions. I have no clue. But if we look at the things that we don't understand about plasma physics or other things that we can't really explain, that goes over a lot of just regular common people's heads, I bet there's some type of explanation out there for a lot of it as well, too. But I also think we're seeing a massive amount of events. I don't really typically side with skeptics on their idea of debunking things, because all they do is chalk things up to a coincidence. And I don't think that's a good answer for anything that they can't explain, but they like to think so. But after talking to so many, I definitely see a lot of points that they do raise, which are strong ones on a more scientific basis to this as well, too. But I don't get the government. I think this is a combination of events, to be 100% honest with you. Pull for funding, like I keep mentioning. I think that there is something that they can't explain. It is probably one of these anomalies. It is something that might not be here. It might be a weather thing. It might be some type of natural phenomena that occurs, or it might be aliens. I have no clue. But doesn't mean that they're not going to use that to their advantage. And it doesn't mean they're not going to use it to push for something where next thing you know, you see a bunch of money get sent somewhere and you never see where it goes. And I think that boils down to other things as well, too. I go, if you really want to redeem a lot of solid points or cover your ass on a lot of certain subjects, why don't you cover your ass with the public? And that's not just the idea that this information could leak out there, but bring us some sanity when it comes to what the hell you're actually doing. I mean, we don't need to know maybe the tools or measurements of all this type of stuff if you feel like that's too sensitive, but let us know what you're working on. What are things that you're doing? Because you're doing something, because the number of occurrences has sparked up since the Manhattan Project. I mean, there is a clear evidence that we've seen more encounters, we've seen more inclusions, and everyone's point to that is always, well, we launched a nuclear bomb that could change the face of the world, or, they don't want that getting out, so maybe they need to monitor us. I don't think that's true. But what points do I have to refute that? we don't have any information. There's still this thing where we call it unidentified aerial phenomena now. It's unidentified. We have not been able to identify it. That's what that fucking word means.
And we finally admitted that. At least that's progress, right?
We're in 2022. We have fucking iPhones that can do anything. Why can't we identify? That's where I just bring up these questions where you start really realizing why it's taken so long is because nobody has ever wanted to touch the topic besides maybe people that aren't in a certain place where they have to worry about their tenure. Researchers or scientists, for instance, if you're not retired, you're not going to come across one that's not researching into this thing. Massimo, other people that I've talked to who are set and established, they can search up this stuff. They can look at what this is, try and find a scientific conclusion or try and find something about it because they are established. You haven't opened up the door for discourse, which I thought was really interesting about establishing a certain thing at New Jersey to be able to go get your college degree or whatever and studying aerial phenomena. Do I think it's going to be a beneficial aspect? No. But I think that opens up the door for more researchers, astronomers, and other people to start looking at this part of the sky that maybe they not have focused on. And if we look at space, for instance, there's a lot of angles you could tackle. So now if we have a certain division, much like we have a space force, but not just an intelligence community that's reviewing this, but now you're giving the option for open scientists to be able to look into this, you might actually start coming up with some answers. Because I feel like for the longest time, as much as we have reports, document data, and as much work as like the general community of the UFO Twitter has done, it definitely helps to have the government willing to let and funnel resources into other people who want to take this to a different level, want to try and get an information basis on it. Because if it is something that is real, if it is aliens or something, it's good to know that maybe they might not be out for the worst intentions. Hopefully we can decipher out that information. I think the next year or so is going to be really tricky because I think we're also, like Larry said, we're more focused on the political issues that are happening here now, right in front of us, the actual verifiable threats. And unless one of these UFOs or video cameras blows up in a person's hand while they're filming it that disappears 2 seconds later, then we're probably not going to see it. But I'm gonna leave a couple chips at the table just so you know.
Well, the rockets are blowing up over Skinwalker. Yeah, well, we won't go there, but
go there, please.
I was going to say, no, it just dawns on me we haven't asked Siri either. We may be missing a bet, but I think one of the things that would show me that change had really occurred. Okay, if you're right, there are programs being set up at universities. There are legitimate scientists that are, looking at the questions. But if you were to show me an article on this subject, let's say an article strictly on an analysis of unconventional behavior, something that you talked about, Campbell, that came from the UK, a scientific article talking about the scenario for these, balls to interact. And if you showed me that appearing in Science or an astrophysics journal or someplace, a peer review academic verified journal, I would think it had made some progress. I see no sign of that happening yet. I think legitimate, very qualified scientists can engage with it, but they have to engage with it out in the UFO community, which is what Avi is doing. Avi is not engaging in it within the astrophysics community. I'm sorry, he's talking about it, but he's not publishing papers. He's not, he doesn't have a set of graduate students working on projects at Harvard. They're going to produce new papers. So it's still, we've made a lot of progress in opening up this dialogue about UFOs and UAPs. I don't know that it's really embedded itself in really the intelligence community, the serious intelligence community that I was talking about, tasked with this at National Security Council level, or the scientific community. So I'm optimistic that we've made progress, but I haven't seen it move up to that final stage. We can talk about it now, and people may not laugh at us in public, but doing it professionally as part of your day job is another story.
Sounds cool as shit to me if you have that on your license. I talked to a space lawyer. Come on, dude. You can't have that on a resume.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
I,
you can make the Discovery Channel, okay, or the History Channel, but will you make science?
Everybody else is getting paid, just little
Yeah.
snippets and stuff. Have you seen the History Channel from like all day until it hits midnight, and then it's just a freaking giant Star Wars spaceship floating above the pyramids, and it tells you how the aliens built it? You're like, okay, this makes sense.
Robbie, would you be able to pull up the first chapter of my website? Actually,
Oh yeah, let's give you another promo.
Well, well, it's actually yeah. I mean, whatever. It's unmonetized. I'm not making any money from
Is
any
it
of this. It's just a side project.
What
But
is it?
it's the initial search is the first section.
Search.
I just wanted to go over it really quick because I do have a list of peer-reviewed physics journal papers. So if you scroll down quickly, and then here we go. Okay, so scroll up a little bit. I'm sorry, I missed. Okay, so scroll up just a little bit more to the bolds there. Here we go. Okay, so this, so I sort of spell out how I approached the subject originally. So I'm saying like I got confused by why the government was sort of saying like, oh, like Obama's statements, like we don't know what they are, we can't explain how they move, their trajectories. And I was thinking to myself, like, why is he saying that? That makes no sense for the president to encourage people to think about UFOs. What does that mean? So, I say here, my next step was to turn to academic sources like peer-reviewed science journals, because that's how the undergraduate degree. I went to one of the best law schools in Canada, Queen's University. I dropped out, but I did get in and went. But anyway, so
okay,
I looked up.
I went to community college.
Yeah, I looked up UAP, and it brought up this 2016 article, To Investigate or Not to Investigate, by these two researchers in the peer-reviewed physics science journal, Frontiers in Earth Science. And here, let's just go really quickly through what they say here. So atmospheric phenomena have recently been measured. Could you scroll down just a tiny bit? Okay, so and then just a couple more, and then okay, here we go. Exactly. Rare and unusual atmospheric lights have consistently been observed and have possessed a series of recurring features. They have the appearance of a free-floating light bulb with dimensions ranging from decimeters up to 30 meters. They are characterized by geometric structures. They have a time duration ranging from seconds to hours, characterized by the formation of light bulb clusters and the ejection of mini light bulbs. They may also show very high velocity, 8,000 to 9,000 meters per second, which is the exact same velocity described by Kevin Knuth in his paper talking about the radar data that Kevin Day describes personally witnessing during the Nimitz event, which was 8,600 meters per second roughly. So they're describing the same thing. Now, one way of looking at it is these people are in their field studies reporting UFOs that are not natural phenomena, but they are labeling them as natural in order to talk about them scientifically. The other side of it is perhaps they are these phenomena that the UK Ministry of Defense, CIA and stuff are talking about. Like in the Robertson report, they cite Foo Fighters, and then they say, oh, we think that these may be electromagnetic phenomena. And then they say David T. Griggs, professor from UCLA, believes, and he's a geophysicist, thinks that these aren't outside the realm of nature. They've never definitively shown us these things. Now, those things have not been proven definitively. They've been observed in field studies. But then you combine them, the 2014 paper in Physical Review Letters, Optical and Spectral Characteristics of Ball Lightning, we have verified proof that these luminous phenomena do exist in Earth's atmosphere. And one way of looking at it is that, oh, maybe it's all these things. That doesn't fully add up to me. If they are all natural, and I'm not saying I think that, I'm only pointing to the documents that I've looked at, and I have a complete open mind to what's happening. If they are natural, there is this more generic ball lightning thing. Small spheres occur directly after lightning strike, evaporate. These things that are, lasting hours up to 30 meters wide and doing all these other things, they have not been proven to exist, though they are being discussed in the peer-reviewed data. And the, jury's out as to what exactly they are, because we haven't gotten spectral analysis done of a sufficient resolution to actually perfectly describe what we're seeing. But all these things seem to be getting thrown together to me. And the real thing that really fascinates me is that within all of the information we have from within the government that's verified, declassified documents from National Archives and stuff, suggests that the intelligence agencies are convinced that they are all natural, and that is why they are treating them the way they are. That could be in error. And based on all publicly available information I can find, it has not been proven that these most extraordinary objects are natural. I think that that could be what is the actual case. I don't know that. And it concerns me that these declassified records are out there, and they say the government knows that they are occurring, and then they also say they aren't certain what they are. That just drives me crazy, honestly. And yeah, Larry, what do you think of that? Like, do you think the government believes that all of them are natural and they're operating under that assumption? Do you think that there's sort of like a continuous argument still happening? Yeah, what's your take?
I think, and it's interesting because, and those articles are interesting. I'd seen some of the light phenomena studies. What I'm thinking about is when someone tackles a solid, then we'll get to it. But you know, and in looking historically at the press releases the Air Force issued versus the internal documents, I always found a great dichotomy. And the press releases certainly always were on the line of these are phenomena, whether they're meteors or they're atmospheric, they're astronomical phenomena. That was the standard. If you just looked at the press releases and the public appearances, the image you would get is they sincerely think that they're all natural. If you look at the internal memoranda, which we can't see recently. We FOIA for documents, okay, and we can find out that an incident occurred, but we don't have any. The only documents that I can think of, and you all help me, that recently that we've actually gotten a view inside what they think about it are the drone documents off California, which, you know, some great internal looks at what they thought. But we don't see those for the aircraft carrier encounters or the task groups. We don't see those internal memoranda. So I can't see what they thought internally. And whether they, certainly with the drone swarms, they didn't think those were natural phenomena, you know, so there was no doubt about that. They didn't have any answers, but they clearly internally, and of course, they didn't say anything externally. So kind of rambling around your question, I think the assumption always is when this report goes in and people start dealing with it, the assumption is that it's a misidentification or it's a natural or astronomical phenomena. And if we look at it, we're going to come up with that answer. Okay, that's just a knee-jerk reaction. And it's the expectation, you know, because that's, you know, especially if it came out of the public, you know, we expect you to provide an answer. We expect you to do it quickly, you know. So I think that's the starting point. I think they're sincere about that. If you listen to the folks talking in the committee, I think they always think if we had just a little more time or a little more data, we'd identify it and then we wouldn't have to worry about this, right? So I think that's sincere. I really do, because they haven't seen any sign of hostility or adverse. It's like, let's leave it to the scientists. Could we just not leave this to the scientists? You know, because we're not seeing it.
Well, your best rule of thumb would be look at anybody who's ever published anything that says it's not natural phenomena and it is an alien encounter, and see if there is a giant list of articles about that person. Then you can look at it as maybe it's a smear tactic for someone incorporating something. The best thing to do is to discredit somebody if they write something that could be true in a sense as well too. Now, the knee-jerk reaction when it comes to it being a natural phenomena, I mean, like I said in so many of our talks, Campbell, is that they don't need to tell you jack. That Freedom of Information Act thing should be seen as like they're giving you a gift of information that they don't need to tell you. So saying that they're going to be 100% honest when it comes to if it is an aircraft or it is this, you got to understand they probably are going to keep that a little bit secretive. But where I start to, it goes back to the hearing thing again. When they're making public displays of talking about it, it doesn't seem like they're actually talking about it. It just seems like, yeah, they might do more of the information behind a closed door, but they're letting the general public enjoy this show in a sense. And there's going to be some people that we know are probably less developed in their brain that are going to watch and be like, they're talking about it, Jim. It's not necessarily true. It is a show. It is a Hollywooded version. It is this type of thing that has been known just to show you that they are looking into it so you can stop sending them emails and fucking letters with millions of stamps on it because you're 7 countries away wondering when you're going to get UAP disclosure. These are all tactics that have happened in the past. This is what I try and keep in mind, is that when we talk about my always focus on any of these things isn't just like a government aspect, but the only reason I like the government so much is it's the best example of psychological manipulation that you can possibly see. You know, I have no clue if this is real. I have no clue if this is fake. You see that happen with media manipulation. You see that happen with so much stuff. When it's easier to jump the gun on things when there is no smoking gun. And that's what this whole thing is with the hearing or something like that. It's good that it's being talked about, but you know how many people are going to let up pressure about the topic all because they're like, oh, the government's looking into it. Okay, well, how long are you going to be saying that? Because if they don't see a lot of progress after a year, you're going to start putting the boot down again, putting that gas pedal forward. Because I mean, to me, I've watched the UFO community gone from trending for 2 days in a row to not trending at all. And now more people are interested in the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial than they are the UFO one. I mean, that's not just me, but that thing has only been going on a couple of weeks, and this thing has been going on for years. So it's about skewing the general public. That's my interpretation of it. I mean, if we see any conclusive evidence within a year, or any conclusive actual studies being done, research or scientists that have been reached out to for interviews besides Mick West on CNN, then yeah, I would take it as maybe they are looking into it seriously. But like we've mentioned a couple times in the show already, I just don't see that to be true. I think if we look at documents, a really hard tactic that Larry knows is to decipher if this is Cold War type tactics. Is this something else when you're looking at, just anything to do with old school Russia military collusion, whatever you want to talk about it. Propaganda, man. That's one thing I think we need to also funnel in on a lot of this aspect of the talks that we have. So make sure, I think it's easier to push for natural phenomena or some type of occurrence when it comes to that. I think it's probably more than likely most occurrences are probably something of that sort. But if it's something serious, they wouldn't tell you unless you were kidnapped and you're like influencer Gabby Petito or something like that. Like that's the only time you're ever going to know about, you're ever going to hear like actual evidence about it.
Well, not to be, but since I'm old, I get to be a little skeptical. There's also the political part of the equation. I mean, if you look at Tucker Carlson, clearly got a lot of visibility, a lot of response from his particular base to the subject of UFOs, because you get to be kind of like, let's get the man, they're hiding stuff from us. Let's go after the government. It's kind of muckraking. Okay. It does that well. And some of the politicians, it's like, oh, well, okay, my base would probably enjoy that too. Now, what do I want to do? Do I want to get some visibility in the media by poking, a sore spot like UFOs? Or how about if I follow up on some of those inspector general reports that show how much money we wasted in Afghanistan or Iraq, or, which can I do and get a little media coverage, and like, I don't get killed doing it. The establishment doesn't push back on me and I don't get, like gutted. Oh, let's go for the UFO thing. Let's transparency. We want transparency. What are you guys really doing? Let's look like a hard ass, right? And I would just have to say, in good old fashioned politics, if you have to look at somewhere where you're poking the government about UFOs is probably a relatively safe thing to do. Now, did that sound, I don't know, Campbell, I won't say skeptical. How about cynical? Can we use cynical?
I think there's a lot of overlap there. Actually, I'd like to ask you a question, Larry, about the original hearings in the 60s and then sort of the resolution of Blue Book. I believe you said in your last appearance that you became interested in around 64, and if I remember right, that's around the time that the whole thing with J. Allen Hynek, where he attributed the mass sighting to swamp gas infamously, in a way that's inconsistent with scientific understanding of swamp gas, but there's apparently some pressure from the Air Force to explain it no matter what. I'm just curious, when you were sort of seeing that yourself, were you like enthusiastic originally when the government said like we're going to do a formal study with independent scientists and all of this stuff, or were you concerned even then?
I was, well, okay. It was ludicrous. Let's put it. When you look at my picture, you see behind me, you see that orange thing, which is a Celestron 8 Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. I was into amateur astronomy even at that point in time. Okay. So at about that same time, 64, 65, the swamp gas thing, I think, was actually 66. But we had a big wave of sightings over Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas. I saw it in real time. I listened to it in real time. And, lots of reports. And the next day, the Air Force issued the statement that said, yeah, all these people saw the constellation Orion. And I'm going, not at 10 o'clock in July, they did not. No. And they got jumped on quick. I mean, it was so embarrassing that it's like, I don't know if the public relations guy just had to leave the service or whatever, but it was kind of like Hynek swamp gas thing. There were so many ludicrous answers that were being given, kind of like knee-jerk type stuff, that you just couldn't accept it. It's like, how stupid do you think I am? So that, I think that was my response. There were such severe disconnects that what it immediately said to me is, if they're investigating it seriously, that's not what they're giving us information before they could possibly have known what it really was. And so that means what? That they're doing a good job of it and just not telling us, or they just not really doing a good job. So that question was predominant right then. And it was kind of like in your face. And that's what really led, that forced those incidents in the 64, 65, 66 are what forced the Air Force to exit the whole thing via the Condon Committee. Kind of like, okay, we are so tired of this. We've got to find somebody that'll sign on to a contract to make this all go away so we don't have to worry about it. Okay. And then we had the Condon Committee, and within months, somebody inside the committee is leaking a letter that says Dr. Condon has already agreed that there's nothing to this, and that's what the study will find. Well, I mean, come on now. Everybody thinks we were kind of naive in the 60s, but no, we really weren't that stupid. It's like, wait a minute. No, we don't trust any of this. Did that answer your question, Campbell?
Yeah, that's perfect.
You guys are in a whole nother realm. This is why I wanted to have you both on, because Campbell's going to ask good questions and Larry, you got good answers. Is there anything else you guys want to touch about? Anything?
I can't think of anything specific. I mean, we could go on forever on this subject, I imagine, but yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of really good topics related to the hearings.
I'm sure we'll do probably a couple more episodes like this, but figured it's a good
I
start.
think the only comment I would make is that more observations don't necessarily get us there. It's like everybody's always waiting for the perfect case. It's like, if we get this one thing, we can tie it down and know one way or the other. And, we've got hundreds of thousands of observations already. So we have to do something different if we're going to resolve this problem. I like those articles that are on Campbell's page, because at least that shows that one aspect of, they're using data that we have. They're not waiting for something new. They're using data that we already have that you can treat scientifically to at least address part of it. And I think one of the things we have learned from the committee, we're never going, and when I say we, the SCU, the Scientific Coalition, really feels that we have the skills and the techniques that if we just had enough sensor data, enough what they are probably already have with their FLIR instruments and the radar, and then we could do something with it. But in truth, they're not going to give that to us. It's just really not going to happen because of security concerns. So I guess my last comment is we're going to have to learn to make progress with what we've got. If we just wait for some magic bullet, whether it's a committee hearing or whatever to occur, no, it's you're going to have to use what you can get for yourself. Nobody's going to give it to you.
I'm so excited to get you on a JFK panel. I got 9 people involved in this thing right now, so it's gonna be a good JFK discussion. But UAPs is I'll have to get more people on to do a panel about that too. Get everybody incorporated into it. It's a topic I got to learn more about. I stepped away from a little while. It was getting too much. I was getting associated, in Campbell's words, as a UFO podcast, and had to step away from a little bit, but I'm back. I'm interested into it. Hopefully we'll see some answers, but I think it's a group effort and everybody's got to work together. That means government, that means people, that means anybody willing to pitch a hand, I would say. Guys, I'm going to link both of your links in the description. It's been a pleasure chatting with both of you. And thanks everyone for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank.